overall deal with Aquaman is this: a little bit better than the Justice League, much better, I think, than Superman versus Batman. Doesn't touch Wonder Woman, and it's not getting to the Batman levels, but that's sort of almost like from a different iteration of the DC movie universe, really, at this point. So
before they let Zack Snyder screw everything up.
Yeah, so within that framework, and I really like Man of Steel, so I don't a second best to Wonder Woman. I don't think it's as good as Man of Steel, but that's a very debatable thing with everybody apparently. But it's in the upper level of the DC movies, but they still don't have the right exact tone like Marvel. So I don't think it's going to have nearly as much crossover appeal. I don't think it's going to flop or anything like that. It's not something most people, I think, will need to watch twice, though, necessarily. But I think it was sufficient for what it was. It was respectful, I think, enough for my understanding of original property. But it definitely has heavy doses of cheese. The acting from a lot of it is, it's bearable, but it's sort of like substandard in certain areas. Some of the CGI, same issue. None of it's, Spawn level, if anybody remembers that. But it's not amazing either, like some of the other films that have come out. So it's not bad. One thing I like a lot, at least in certain parts, I really like the score. I like the little Aquaman theme they have. And I also like that it's, generally speaking, a fun movie, meaning they kind of celebrate the ocean and water. And I know that sounds weird, but I don't like water. I don't like the ocean. I'm like a cat in that way. And this movie made me wanted to like the ocean and like water. I know that sounds strange, but they kind of celebrated it. So the movie had sort of a fun feeling with that. The language was not horrible. Like, there's times they could have had much worse swear words, and instead he would say something like, screw you. And my point is, like, the language is not something I think that writes it off as a family movie. There's one lady who dresses mildly immodest, but it's sort of one thing, and it's not over the top, and it's not again and again as far as modesty. So, there's a kiss or two, but it's not horribly over the top. I don't know. Sometimes I mention the moral elements in the movie is why I'm doing that. I don't know if Aquaman's parents were married, but they did have him. But I don't know if they're married or not or anything. It seemed like they were, according as far as if people from Atlantis and people from Earth could get married. But mild spoiler, when Aquaman does get his more traditional gear, that's my favorite part of the movie. When he comes out full Aquaman, because I like how they kind of made Aquaman. They worked hard to make him cool. First of all, they played with the actor they chose. They played into sort of the Poseidon kind of element of Aquaman, like a wild man of the sea type of thing. I think that was a good choice. He wasn't like the blonde pretty boy that's in a lot of iterations. But they did give him a relatively traditional costume at one point in the movie with modifications for the modern era. But I liked it when he was full out Aquaman. I was like, all right, he's Aquaman now. Dolph Lundgren's in it.
Yeah.
William Dafoe's in it. So they got some interesting actors in it. I think the guy who was the template for the clones, Jango Fett, that actor from New Zealand, I think he's in it. There's a couple other people I don't know who they were. There's nothing that's super cringe. There's a couple parts where I'm like, okay, this movie's a little cheesy, whatever. Nothing is super, super hardcore cringe, though. And there's some pretty dope parts. So if you're relatively interested in Aquaman just a little bit, or those kinds of movie, definitely see it. But you don't have to rush to go see it. It's something that's going to change your life, anything like that. Positives about the movie, again, from this angle, is they had a very positive father-son relationship for the most part, even though their main activity seems to be drinking beer, which, okay, whatever. But I like that they had that. They have a very faithful husband who is loyal to his wife and longs for her. They show like a good element there between his parents. There's a message in the movie about basically Aquaman is supposed to act as a bridge figure between, I don't know if you call them the races, but surface dwellers and those who dwell underneath. And eventually he sort of fulfills that destiny I guess that's sort of a positive message in a way. You could use those lessons.
It'd be funny if they called the surface dwellers like crackers because they're all dry. Wouldn't that be funny?
Crackers, yeah, sure. Crackers, that'd be good. But then if they lived underneath, it'd be saltine. I don't know. Yeah. Now there's one thing from me as a part Sicilian. They go to Sicily, and I was looking around, and the Sicilians were super light. They look like Northern Italians. They didn't hardly have any of the dark Sicilians like in this little area of Sicily. And to make matters worse, they were like destroying the Sicilian village. Mm-hmm. They had a pretty all-out fight destroying it, but I liked it because it was beautiful, this little part of Sicily, and I thought it was interesting. You don't see many. It was unexpected. Nowadays movies like to go to Hong Kong or they go to Japan. They do that on purpose for overseas markets. I like how they had Sicily as a choice of where they were because I was like, that was unexpected for them to have this battle in Sicily. What else do you want to know about Aquaman?
Well, no, that's enough. That's probably all you can do without going into too many spoilers. I was kind of interested in seeing it mainly because I want to see how Jason Momoa plays the role because they offered me the role, right? But they offered me 3 different parts. They said, David, you can play Aquaman, or Black Adam, or Darkseid. And I said, well, look, why don't you get Jason Momoa to play Aquaman, get The Rock to play Black Adam, and then I'll go ahead and play Darkseid. And so they decided to go with that. So that's all set up. But yeah, I am looking forward to seeing the movie, to seeing how they roll with their parts.
Basically, it's Thor underwater, just not as good as Thor. Mm-hmm. That's really what the
might be as good as Thor 2 though, right?
I like Thor 2. I liked all the Thor movies better. I love the third Thor, and I really like the first one. Mm-hmm. I like the second one, Dark World. I like Thor 2. So.
Okay, and that's why I don't trust your opinion about movies. All right.
Well, here's what was good about it. The supporting cast was funny. First of all, in Thor 2, in my opinion. That's one good thing about it. And I forget what else is positive about it off the top of my head. But you didn't like Thor 2?
No.
Not at all?
No, parts, but it's just like... I never liked the action that's so fast that you can't figure out what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's almost all these movies now.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like that for any movies, but that's hardly...
It's like a I want to say cheap replacement for good writing, but it's not. It's massively expensive replacement for good writing.
Yeah, but it's sort of a visual cop-out. Like, they could do things, with choreography and other things, but instead it's just this blur. But that's almost all those movies. I didn't say Thor 2 was the most amazing. I just said I still think it's better than Aquaman.
Okay, that's fine. You don't have to defend yourself.
But I would still see Aquaman if you're relatively interested in the comics, and it's something that I think most people would feel comfortable, for the most part, taking their kids.
No one's interested in Aquaman from the comics.
I don't think that's as true as people say.
No. Apart from his presence in the Justice League, no one cares about this guy who can talk to fish.
I mean, if you actually think about it, though, for real, David, if you think about this for a second, if you had the power to talk to fish and you had those underwater abilities you would actually be incredibly powerful. Now, obviously, once you got to the surface, you would be limited. But if you think about how large of the planet is composed of water and how many animals are underneath, it's actually it'd be an incredible power. Besides that, that's not all. He's actually a king in essence. He's the king of an underwater city with advanced technology, Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And they do a little bit of that, dipping into a little bit of the Greek mythology, but not too much. I'm just saying, people kind of sleep on Aquaman. I'm not an Aquaman apologist.
Yeah, you are.
But I will. Last thing I'll point out, I always watch for this kind of stuff in movies. There's 2 places where evolution sneaks in, and I always like to point into it. It's in the very beginning of the movie. They're at a marine museum when he's a little boy, and the teacher says, all life began in the sea. So if we want to better understand ourselves, we must journey there. Boom, right away. I catch that stuff, that the evolutionary worldview is just ever present. And there's another place where they talk about one of the kingdoms of the underwater peoples who went into the trenches and they regress and devolved, and they became like these less than human things. Which it's an interesting concept, but it's sort of de-evolution.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the aesthetics, I think people will like. These underwater suits that these guys have to go to the surface are freaking cool. The underwater suits are pretty dope. Like they look cool. So like a lot of the aesthetic is pretty good overall. Some of it's very fishy. I know that sounds funny, but some of the aesthetic, like, that's too fishy. They're riding around on seahorses or sea lions, whatever. They're seahorses. It's not and they're riding around on hammerheads and stuff. So you just have to accept.
Look, you're grinning. You actually think this stuff is cool. You got this big grin on you, this big kid-like grin on your face, like, oh, and they have these cool fish shoots and blah 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 blah.
Because I can't decide if I like stuff like that or not, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? It's like, anyways. So that's the Aquaman review. Is see it, but it's not going to change your life. But it's better than the other stuff. You're not going to be depressed after you see it. You know what I'm saying? That's my review.
All right.